Let's get started. Club pulsed to the beat of the music, the bass vibrating through the air, almost deafening. Lights flashed in chaotic rhythms, mixing with the smoke that curled toward the floor. Crowd moved like waves, blending into one living, breathing entity, drinking in both alcohol and the frenzied rhythm of the night. Lauren leaned toward her friend, laughing at something silly. In her hand was a tall glass of Prosecco, bubbles rising and clinging to the sides like the last fragments of sanity. She was already pleasantly drunk, not to the point of losing control, but in that sweet, light-headed state where every movement felt smooth and life just felt good. "Another round!" Tara shouted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her dark eyes sparkled with excitement. They drank, their glasses clinking against the table. Lauren ran her tongue over her lips, savoring the tart taste of the sparkling wine. The music wrapped around her, hypnotic and all-consuming. She loved to dance, especially on nights like this when she didn't have to think, when she could simply lose herself in the rhythm. "Let's dance," Cindy shouted. Without waiting for a reply, she grabbed Lauren's arm and pulled her into the crowd. At first, Lauren just moved to the beat, her hips swaying, her arms flowing lazily, laughter bubbling on her lips. Then, someone's hands found her waist. She didn't resist. She didn't even see his face at first, just felt him pressed against her, his hands firm on her thighs, his hot breath near her cheek. That's when the real magic began. He moved with confidence, light, controlled touches, his hands sliding over her body with a slow, teasing intent that was impossible to misread. Lauren didn't pull away. Instead, she pressed closer, tilting her head back as a familiar heat spread through her body. A whisper in her ear. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was enough. His voice was low, husky. "You move well," he murmured. She smiled, her fingers trailing down his arm, resting on his wrist. His skin was warm, and the alcohol made her own feel even more sensitive. "Thank you," she said, licking her lips. "You too, handsome." Their bodies found the rhythm together, moving as one, as if they had known each other forever. The stranger's hands slid playfully lower, fingers tightening on her thigh, a slight provocation, a test. She didn't push them away. On the contrary, her fingers gripped his palm a little harder. "Are you alone here?" She laughed, too loud, too playful. "No." He leaned in closer. Nearby, Cindy's laughter rang out. Phones flashed, faces flickered. Club was alive, buzzing, demanding victims and offering them oblivion. And in that chaotic, pulsing atmosphere, no one, not Lauren, not her friends, noticed when her phone screen lit up. Miles away from the club, in the dim light of the bedroom, Jake lay sprawled on the couch, lazily scrolling through his phone. The TV blared in the background, but he hadn't paid attention to it in at least 10 minutes. It had been a long day, but nothing out of the ordinary. Work, a few meetings, a workout. Lauren had gone out with her friends. She'd told him she'd be late. He didn't mind. He'd even hugged her goodbye. For a long time, he believed they were doing well. Sure, they had their little arguments. What couple didn't? He knew she had moments of irritation, restlessness. But he thought they were just that, moments. Temporary. His phone screen suddenly lit up with a notification. Lauren has started a live stream. Jake raised an eyebrow. That was unusual. She wasn't the type to post much, let alone go live. He tapped the notification, expecting to see her usual playful, "Hey girls," and maybe a few glasses of Prosecco in the frame. But what appeared on the screen made his breath catch. Club. Bright, flashing lights. A sea of moving bodies. The hum of music vibrating through the air. And her. Lauren. She was at the center of the frame, dancing, arching her back, throwing her head back. But she wasn't alone. A man stood behind her. His hands were on her hips, firm, confident, without hesitation. They were moving together, too close. Too familiar. Jake's vision darkened. He didn't even realize he was holding his breath. Then she wrapped her arms around the man's neck, fingers trailing over his shoulders, lips slightly parted. That look, the one that was supposed to be his. Jake sat up, his feet hitting the floor. A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't happening. But the screen didn't lie. The stranger's hands slid around his wife's waist, pulling her in. And she didn't pull away. She didn't protest. No, she leaned closer, whispered something in his ear. Then she laughed. Even through the phone, Jake felt it. He pressed the mute button, drowning out the voices, the music. But one sentence still cut through the noise. So what if I'm married? The important thing is to have fun. Jake froze. His whole body tensed. Fire boiled in his chest, but not the kind that burned. The kind that destroyed, but this wasn't the kind of fire that burned out instantly. This flame was slow, consuming everything in its path. Jake's head buzzed. He stared at the screen, but the image had blurred. He couldn't see anymore. He could only feel something inside him cracking, breaking. Then the comments flooded in. Wow, Lauren Holy Anderson. Did Jake see that? Beautiful couple. Damn, she's married. Jake, man, you in here? Someone had remembered he existed. One of their mutual friends. Red circles flashed in Jake's vision. Everyone can see. He jumped up, his phone nearly slipping from his grasp. But he held on, still unable to believe what was happening. Lauren. His Lauren. She was holding another man live on camera. Not in secret. Not in the shadows. But right in front of the world. Jake abruptly turned off the stream, tossed his phone onto the couch, and took a step back. Impossible. He ran a hand over his face, trying to cool the heat in his head, but it wasn't working. Her voice, that damn voice, full of flirtation and laughter, had already cut into his mind like a splinter under his skin. So what if I'm married? The important thing is to have fun. His jaw clenched. His teeth ground together. Okay. Have fun. Jake exhaled slowly, unclenching his fists, and walked toward the bedroom. He moved without rage. Without hysteria, opening the closet, he pulled out a suitcase and tossed it onto the bed. Then, methodically, he started packing t-shirts, jeans, shirts, papers. Everything he needed. He didn't expect an explanation. There was nothing to explain. Jake stood there for a moment, gripping a shirt in his hands but never placing it in the suitcase. His temples throbbed. His breathing remained steady. But deep inside, something colder stirred. Something sharper. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. A feeling that stripped away emotion, leaving behind only one thing. Action. His gaze flickered to the suitcase. What now? Just leave? Spend the night in a motel? Come back later and have a long, drawn-out conversation about what went wrong? No. He wasn't going to leave Lauren any room to maneuver. Jake turned and walked toward his study. Sitting down at his desk, he powered on his laptop. The screen flickered to life, casting a glow across his face. His hands moved mechanically. A search bar. A real estate website. Private listing, click. A new application. He typed quickly, without hesitation. Every word precise. Urgent, house for sale. Excellent condition, fully furnished. Move-in ready. Reason: the former owner prefers to live in clubs. Brevity is the sister of contempt. He attached photos from the real estate agency, ones they had taken a year ago, back when moving had been just a fleeting idea. The house still looked the same. Nothing had changed. Except for everything. Click. The ad went live. Jake leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands over his face. He took a deep breath. But that wasn't enough. Turning back to the laptop, he opened Lauren's social media. Live stream history. The video had already saved automatically. Till she deleted it, hundreds, maybe thousands of people could see it. Jake pressed play. Full screen. bright flashing lights, loud music. And there she was, arms around a stranger's neck. The man's hands gripping her waist, their movements too fluid, too synchronized. And then her voice. "So what if I'm married? The important thing is to have fun." Jake turned up the volume. Just a little louder. Let her see. Let her hear. With one last glance at the screen, he stood, grabbed his suitcase, and walked toward the door. The house, the one he had built with her, the one where they had once been happy, felt like nothing more than a box of bricks soaked in lies. He put on his shoes, threw on his jacket, ran a hand over his chin. Assessing. Calculating. There was no reason to linger. Jake opened the door. Tapped outside. Click. The lock turned. Silence. Lauren woke to a sharp jolt of pain in her temples. Her head throbbed. Her mouth was dry. Her entire body ached, as if she had been knocked down and put back together again, over and over. She groaned, trying to open her eyes. The light streaming through the thick curtains was too bright. Where was she? Lauren's eyelids drooped, and her thoughts were a tangled mess. Slowly, her consciousness began to push through the fog of intoxication. The scent of foreign cologne. The warmth of another body next to hers. Something heavy draped around her waist. She tensed. A sharp inhale. Her heart leaped into her throat. She wasn't alone. Cautiously, she turned her head. Through the haze of her hangover, a man's face came into view, fuzzy, smudged. Dark hair. Tan skin. Light stubble. The blanket had slipped, exposing a bare shoulder and more. No memory. Just flashes. Dancing. Blinding lights. Hot breath on her neck. Strong hands on her waist. Dizzy laughter. Alcohol. Someone else's lips on hers. Lauren swallowed hard and, with effort, lifted his arm off her waist. She pushed herself upright in bed. The room was unfamiliar, cheap. A hotel? No, a rented loft. Too impersonal to be someone's home. The phone. Where's my phone? She reached toward the nightstand, but her fingers met empty space. A deafening alarm of panic rang in her head, pounding in sync with her hangover. She scrambled to the edge of the bed, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. Behind her, the stranger stirred. He stretched lazily. "Hey, what are you doing?" His voice was husky, hoarse from sleep. Lauren froze, her skin damp with cold sweat. "Where's my phone?" His smirk faded. His brow furrowed. He propped himself up on one elbow, glancing around the room. "No idea." "You either dropped it or," he yawned, then grinned. "Relax." "Relax?" Lauren squeezed her eyes shut, cursing herself. The phone. The phone. Then she spotted it, on the floor near a chair. She lunged for it, grabbed it, pressed the screen. Dead. Shit. She searched blindly for a charger, but of course there wasn't one. Her chest tightened. She didn't know why panic was squeezing her throat. The morning hadn't gone well, but she was an adult, entitled to party. Jake wouldn't find out. The thought hit like an icy wave. She needed to go home. Shower. Change. Wipe away the remnants of this mistake and pretend it never happened. She grabbed her clothes, pulling them on hurriedly. The man in bed watched, his gaze lazy and amused. "You're just gonna leave like that?" "No breakfast." He grinned. Lauren didn't answer. She bolted from the room, slammed the door behind her, and ran down the stairs. Fear crept closer with every step. Something was wrong. Cab ride home felt endless. She sat in silence, swaying with each sharp turn. The moment she plugged in her phone, it vibrated to life. Then came the flood, calls, messages, notifications flashing across the screen. 50 missed calls from Jake. 133 messages from Cindy. 5 from his mother. 2 from his mother. She clicked on Cindy's texts first. Cindy, did you see what happened? Oh my God, Lauren. Cindy, your husband. I'm so sorry. Cindy, are you okay? Are you even alive? Unknown number. You know you're a celebrity now, right? Her pulse pounded. Fingers trembling, she scrolled frantically. Then she saw the link. A recording. Her breath hitched. She clicked. The video loaded. Bright lights. Music. Drunken laughter. Her body pressed against someone else's. Dancing. Flirtation. Hands too familiar on her waist. Lips she didn't recognize. And then her voice, clear, ringing, reckless. So what if I'm married? It's all about having fun. Lauren dropped the phone, but her shaking hands picked it up again. She replayed the clip. So what if I'm married? The important thing is to have fun. Cab jerked to a stop in front of her house. She didn't move. She had screwed up. Hard. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk, breaking the morning silence. Her head buzzed from the hangover, from exhaustion, from panic. She didn't have time to think about how she'd ended up in that damn room or why her life had just crumbled beneath her. Something had to be done. Something had to be fixed. She rounded the corner, her house appearing behind tall trees. A car passed by, but she barely noticed. She was already fumbling for her keys, rehearsing excuses. Jake, there's been a misunderstanding. I was drunk. It was just a joke. None of it sounded convincing. She turned the key in the lock. Clicked but didn't open. She had to push her shoulder against the door. And then she froze. The house was empty. The furniture remained, but everything felt hollow. No familiar scent of fresh coffee. No sound of Jake moving in the kitchen. Just silence. Then she saw it. A single suitcase in the hallway. Jake's suitcase. Her eyes flicked to the desk. A laptop glowed. She stepped forward cautiously. The screen showed a video. The video played on repeat, taunting her. Her breath caught. She stumbled back, her gaze darting to the fridge. A piece of paper was pinned there. Jake's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. That? A misunderstanding? Lauren's breath hitched. She felt like the ground beneath her was crumbling. Jake let out a short, humorless laugh. You weren't thinking? His voice was dangerously calm. You weren't thinking when you wrapped yourself around another man? When you told the whole world that your marriage meant nothing? She shook her head, eyes stinging. No, Jake, please, I swear I didn't mean any of it. He exhaled sharply, looking at her as if she were a stranger. You didn't mean it? He took a step closer, his expression unreadable. Tell me, Lauren, what part of it didn't you mean? The drinking? The dancing? Or the part where you said, so what if I'm married? Lauren flinched as if he had slapped her. Jake, I love you, she whispered, reaching for his hand. He pulled away before she could touch him. You don't love me, he said simply. You love the idea of me. You love the comfort, the security. He glanced toward the house. But you don't respect me. And you sure as hell don't respect our marriage. Tears blurred her vision. I made a mistake. One stupid night and you're just going to walk away? Jake's jaw tightened. One stupid night? That one night was broadcasted for the entire world to see. That one night turned me into a joke. Do you even realize what you've done? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. He took a deep breath, as if steadying himself. I didn't come here to fight, Lauren. I came to say goodbye. Panic gripped her chest. No. No, you don't mean that. His eyes softened, just for a second. But then, just as quickly, the distance returned. I do. He turned toward his car, pulling open the door. Lauren lunged forward. Jake, please. He paused, one hand gripping the car door. Take care of yourself, Lauren. And then, without another word, he got in, started the engine, and drove away. She stood frozen in the driveway, watching as the love of her life disappeared down the street. The morning sun was rising, bright and cruel, casting long shadows over the pavement. Lauren wrapped her arms around herself. The house behind her was empty. The street in front of her was empty. And for the first time she realized, so was she. Lauren stood in silence, staring at Jake's tense face. She couldn't find the words. "Tell me, Lauren," he said, his voice quiet but cutting deep. "Did you forget that you're married, or do you just not care?" She flinched. "You stood there, dancing, clinging to him," Jake continued. "And then you said, the important thing is to have fun. Do you really think this is just a misunderstanding?" I just wanted to relax, you know?" She took a step closer, her arms outstretched as if begging for forgiveness. "It was just a dance. I didn't know that." "You didn't know what?" he interrupted. "That I'd see? That it would get recorded? If no one had found out, you wouldn't even feel guilty, would you?" "No, not like that." Lauren's voice cracked as tears filled her eyes. "I was confused. I missed the warmth, the attention, Jake. I didn't mean to hurt you." He let out a cold, empty laugh. "Warmth? Tension?" His voice was eerily calm. "You know what the problem is, Lauren? I would have given you all of that. I was there for you. But you chose to get it from another man. And not just in secret, but in front of the entire world. It's not like that. It's all wrong." She stepped closer, desperate, but he took a step back. "No, Lauren," he said, quieter now but harsher than ever. "It's exactly like this." His voice didn't waver. "I loved you. You were everything to me. And now?" He shook his head. "Now I have nothing more to say to you." He turned and walked toward his car. Lauren rushed after him. "Don't go, Jake. Please. I want to fix this. I'll prove it meant nothing." He yanked his hand away from her grasp and turned one last time. His eyes were unreadable, void of emotion. "You don't have to prove anything, Lauren," he said. "You've already said it all." Then he got into the car, slammed the door shut, and started the engine. Lauren stood frozen in the driveway, watching as his car disappeared into the distance. He left behind only a cloud of dust and the shattered remains of their life together. Her legs shook. Her hands trembled. A deep, hollow emptiness settled in her chest, one that neither panic nor tears could fill. She turned and walked slowly back inside. The house was quiet. The laptop still sat on the kitchen table, its screen flickering. The video played on repeat, her laughing, dancing, wrapped in the arms of a stranger. Lauren swallowed hard. That moment, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She flinched, pulling it out with trembling fingers. A new notification. Her breath quickened. The sound of blood rushed in her ears. A message from her mother-in-law. Her hands hovered over the screen, as if her body was trying to stop her from reading it. But she already knew what it would say. She opened it. "So, what if you're married? The important thing is to have fun." Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the wooden floor with a dull thud. The house fell silent again. A week passed. The home that had once been their safe haven now belonged to strangers. The real estate agent Jake hired, the same night the video went viral, worked fast. Quick sale. A good price. No delays. 3 days later, the deal was closed. The few belongings Lauren had left behind were boxed up and returned to her through mutual acquaintances. She didn't even have the courage to walk down that street anymore. Jake disappeared from her life as easily as deleting a phone number. The divorce papers were filed the day after the house was sold. No discussions. No fights. No explanations. Jake didn't want to hear her excuses. He didn't answer her calls. He didn't read her messages. He just ended it. Final. Irrevocable. After signing the papers, Lauren sat staring at them for a long time, hoping this was just some terrible dream. But dreams don't leave you with viral videos haunting your social media feed. That same day, someone reposted the recording. Comments didn't stop. Some people laughed. Some judged. Some mocked her. Was it fun? How was it without your husband? Cozy? Don't worry, the clubs are still open. There was nothing left of her old life. The friend she had gone out with that night vanished, erasing herself from Lauren's world. Colleagues at work whispered but never spoke to her. Even her mother didn't know how to talk to her anymore. And Jake? 2 months after the divorce, someone sent her a photo. He wasn't alone. Sitting in a cozy cafe across from a beautiful woman, Jake smiled. A real smile. His eyes shined in a way they hadn't in a long time. A look that used to be just for Lauren. She shut her phone and tossed it aside. She stared into the empty space in front of her, hollow and silent. There was nothing she could do to fix it. And that was the end of her story.